Well, Mr. Paul, Mr. Oguna, welcome to Too Much Information, man.
Oh, thank you, sir. Well, I'm happy to be here. Yeah, happy
Yeah,
to be here.
no, I appreciate it. This is a a true privilege for me. Um, Obviously, we don't necessarily speak every very often, let's say, but um,
Mm.
I did a thing on the podcast Instagram page of people that I would love to have on the podcast, people that whose opinions and views and stories that from my experience and my life that I hold in high regard. And you are one of those people. And it's a very small list. I will say, I'll tell you that. It's a very small list.
Okay. All
So
right. Thank you, man.
I'm super appreciative of you doing this.
Okay. No, my pleasure.
Good stuff. Good stuff. I really want to kind of start, as I start with all my guests, kind of your foundation, your beginning. So that will be kind of your upbringing, your family. Um, yeah, how did you come up? What was the nuts and bolts, the logistics of your upbringing?
Okay. I was born in 1959, April 1st,
Mhm.
in Preston, Lancashire,
Right.
and I was raised in Blackburn, Lancashire, which is about 9 miles away. Um, my background was I was officially adopted. So I
Right.
was raised in a white family,
Hmm.
and so I didn't know I didn't know that in my background I didn't know what adopted meant, but I thought it meant brown.
Right.
So I was raised in on a quite I was schooled. Sorry, I went started school 4 years old in quite a rough neighborhood in Blackburn. I was the only child of color in school until I was around about 11.
Hmm.
When there's myself and a girl called Cherry Waite, who was a Jamaican girl. So there were two of us then who were of African descent in the school. Um, I ended up becoming a fighter because of the background.
Hmm.
Um, at the age of 7, I had a breakdown, and the racism was raw. I mean, this is in the 1960s, so there's no effective anti-racist stuff going on, or
Yeah.
So anybody being in it, and I quite well. I can't say I had a rough experience. It was all I knew.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I grew up ugly and unusual. Um, I got to the age of 13, 14, or well, anchoring thing. I was a choir boy from the age of 8 years old to 13 years old,
Okay.
which was quite intense. It was a cathedral choir, so I got quite a strong work ethic from there.
Right.
Um, and then say from the age of 13 got into the football, got out from the choir, then just started scallywagging.
Hmm.
and and then because of I had a murderous temper, and with the fighting, so I was put into martial arts age 14, 15.
Right.
And then that basically became my religion. That was like a backbone for me. Started amateur boxing 19 years old as well. And then basically I was persuaded I was going to turn professional at boxing age 21, but I
Right.
was persuaded to go into school teaching instead.
Okay.
So I've been a martial arts instructor since I was 15. So I had an aptitude for teaching because my family were teachers married to teachers.
Right.
So I didn't want to be a teacher. So 16 years old, I left school, became an engineer.
Okay.
So I did 5 years at that. So like I said, got to 21, lost my job. Did 6 months working as a technical manager in a plastics firm, and then I was persuaded to go in for teaching. So
Mm-hmm.
which I did. So I didn't go pro at boxing, and I turned became a school teacher after 6 years. Requested a placement in Moss Side, Manchester. Went there as a student on
Mm-hmm.
a teaching practice, and basically didn't leave. So I was there for 13 years.
Okay.
Um, and in that time, I started studying. My final year at college, everything was geared towards race. I did my art exhibition. I was an art student, so
Right.
my art exhibition, all my research and everything, education was all based on race awareness, etc.
And where did
Uh,
that come from? Where did that?
and
Sorry to cut you, but where did that?
um, where did it come from?
Yeah, in the sense, obviously you experienced racism, and you know you was a martial artist, but from from my experience, that doesn't necessarily always mean that you're going to be, um, I don't know if secure or confident enough is the right word to then put that foot forward from that young. Does that make sense?
Well, what had happened at age 11? My mother told me that I was born, that I was actually her son, and that I was born out of a rape. And so, who I thought was my adopted parents, it turned out that my mother was actually my mother. She was already married with 3 children and foster children. So she actually she told me I was born from a rape. And then it's when I was 24 years old, I decided I wanted to find my natural father. I started the search on the last Wednesday in March, and then on Sunday, April 1st, 1984, my dad who'd raised me, my
Mm.
mother's husband, died of a heart attack, and that was on my birthday.
Wow.
So I kind of shocked me up and everything, and it was like,
Yeah.
wow, this is weird. And so I decided I wanted to find out about why my mother would have told me such a thing, because it turned out it wasn't exactly the truth.
Hmm.
And it was what my dad had told me.
Right.
And so there were other circumstances and whatever. So I needed to understand
Hmm.
what were the influences on my mother she was born in the 1930s.
Right.
So I wanted to know what the influences were on her that would make her deny, lie, twist words, etc., etc. So so there was a kind of personal drive to find out about the structure of racism. I
Mm.
also had an intrinsic thing in me, which is about lineage. So how I studied it was to seek the people through 3 phases of race development of race theory. Thanks to a guy called Peter Fryer, who wrote a book called Staying Power.
Right.
And he said there were 3 phases of development: demonology, plantocratic, and then pseudoscientific.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, black as bad. Plantocratic are the ideas of the planter classes to justify enslavement of Africans.
Mm-hmm.
And then pseudoscientific were the pseudoscientific uh, reasons that they gave for white supremacy and black inferiority.
That kind of stuff.
Sorry?
Like is that like that pseudoscience? Is like phrenology and all that kind of stuff? Is that the sort of stuff you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
All of that. Yeah. And just so I took to it like a duck to water.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's another piece of research I did, which is called Confrontation: The Police as a Racist Tool. And I remember that research was externally marked at the college, and the guy who came into market, he gave me about 94 out of 100 for it, then told me to watch my ass. because he just said he said this is excellent, but he said the angle you've got on this, he said it will get you in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, so I said okay. So I for my final teaching practice, I'd requested a placement in Manchester, and I took like a duck to water. You know, I didn't. I basically didn't leave. They employed me as a supply teacher before being qualified,
Right.
and then created a role for me. And
Mm-hmm.
then yeah, that's so I got there what, three years before Gonchester. I got there in '86.
What was Manchester like in '86 then when you got there?
It was the usual. It was an
Right.
inner city area. You know, lots of aggression, violence,
Mm-hmm.
good people,
Yeah.
working hard, trying to make ends meet. Whatever. It's working class. You know, a lot of Caribbean descent, growing number of Asians, working class whites, etc. It was an inner city. You know.
Mm-hmm.
The added bonus came around about 1989, where there were two things that happened. One was in the early 90s, the fall of the Berlin Wall,
Right.
um, which meant that there were a lot of firearms came in.
Right. Okay.
Uh, and then what happened was there was there was the arrival of well, sorry, let me put a context. Context was is that in Moss Side, unemployment of young people between 16 years old and 25 was at 92%.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden,
That's crazy.
you had the local beard man who was selling weed and all that business, but then all of a sudden, whites came crashing in from the Asian community, so the heroin, which of course is a legacy of Britain's growing of opium in India. And then yeah, there was money to be made. And just like in Toxteth, where they used to say, this is Toxteth, not Croxteth, when the brothers found out how much money they could actually earn from the drugs and from that state of unemployment, things went clear. There were some skirmishes. There's a thing called the Pop-In. There's a fight at the Pop-In, and then there was the Tulloch's house was burned, and then there's all kinds of stuff that kicked off. And then basically the small number of guys got together and got into the drugs game, and then it really did it escalated.
So you must have, yeah. So you must have seen, because at this time, you're teaching in a school, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, in your social life or outside of school hours, maybe you're going in these areas and seeing firsthand these things. But focusing kind of on the students that you were teaching and this influx of money, of the negative attributes that come along with drugs, as in family breakdowns and absent parents and all of these things. From your point of view, what did that look like from the initial stages, if that makes sense? Because my only understanding of it is just kind of it's here already. There's people that have got crackheads for parents. There are people that have got heroin addicts for parents. Do you know what I mean? There's people that their parents are or their families are in dealing, and they got shotters for dads and uncles, and that's already there. But I'm thinking that you've obviously been there from before it was there, and you're seeing
Well,
the
the way
process.
to look at it, I went back to Manchester. I've met guys I used to teach, and so the youngest ones are about 33. The oldest ones are 46 now.
Right.
Many of them are grandfathers, and we're in Manchester. We're on the third generation of guys coming through who were touched by this. So you got to remember, it wasn't by accident. There was nothing by. There's a book. See, I was blessed because when I went to Moss Side, I went there with my eyes wide open that these things were kind of happening, that there was nothing by chance. And one of the, there's a book called Now You Do Know, which is a report to the World Council of Churches consultation in 1982, I think it was.
Right.
And basically it outlined the plans for what's called counterinsurgency policy, which is how to destabilize communities, how to make sure that people were distracted. You know, this stuff, what's happening with COVID now, that fear is being put out. They know that they could put the fear out, that the vast majority of people are going to do as they're told. You know, no one's going to challenge anything. They're going to go, yeah, we're like this, we're like that. Well, in Manchester, the white community that was being fragmented and messed around and everything, you know, unemployment, non-attendance at school and truancy, all of these things, they had a group of people that they could look to, and that was Negroes. And these are Negroes who were in gangs and all the time, even though at its peak, Moss Side was only 17th out of 27 policing areas in Manchester. The number one area was Farnworth outside of Bolton for crime. But the ghetto bird was always over alongside Moss Side, Hume and whatever. I used to say to the brothers, you know, I started teaching in Garth Prison 1989. Okay. And started teaching the Mandem, and the Mandem were teaching me. So we were having this reciprocal relationship where my theory as a teacher was being challenged, and then I had to find ways in, which is my martial arts, find ways in to challenge them about the behaviors that were going on. I never, ever, ever said, stop dealing drugs. I never, ever, ever said, don't have guns. I never, ever, ever said, be nice to each other. I said, this is not personal, it's business. Because what happened was, my thing was to bring peace to the neighborhoods. And by doing that, what I wouldn't be doing that by saying, you stop this and you stop that. So I was making them aware of a bigger picture, that the biggest drug dealers who started these things off, the opium wars with China, the British businessmen created around about 17 million opium addicts. So for instance, I was in Swaleside doing a session, and I based it all on the Chinese. This is about 10 years ago. I based it all on the Chinese experience. And there was like 34 guys in the room, 27 down for murder, and out of that high number over drugs. When they saw the amount of opium the British businessmen were floating into China in these big chests, they were like, hey, what? And I said, yeah, these are the guys who are making the policies that become law that now the police back up and then you were getting caught with. So you know, it's just all a big game, Wachuku. As you know, it's everything's going on. I watched the drug game start in its infancy, where there were very few guys who were dealing with the whites. In fact, I was raised in Blackburn. Blackburn, Lancashire was smack city, right? For years. I was raised up around that kind of stuff with the guys I was training in martial arts and whatever, all white dudes. And what happened was, our joke was, when we were down there, was that the black community, they smoke weed. They're all right. And it used to be, cocaine was the rich man's drug. There was no coke in the meat. So you had alcohol, and Blackburn was a fighter's town. Right. So you had the pub fighting going on hardcore. That used to be going on. That's what I was raised around. Right. Then you had the next thing going on. You had the weed. So there's now this is back in the 1970s. So you had some people, you know, they're on the weed and whatever, but it wasn't widespread either. But then in the black communities, a lot of weed, right? So people turn around and tell me, yeah, well, there were Mandem who had, you know, they had the cocaine back then. Yeah, rich man's drug. They'd be on a certain scene, but no, black communities largely didn't have the whites that weren't up on the heroin, on the opium. But then when that gear started licking, the Asian community in Manchester, they were supplying it over, and then it went clear. And we were watching that, then the gun thing starts, and then so I was in school, but then the guys involved were you know, the older brothers, the cousins, and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, I was asked to go down the first wave of guys who were in the prison at the time. And God rest his soul, just buried today, Maurice McPherson, who was a major face in Manchester. I swear, I've got to get it confirmed, but it was Maurice who asked for black studies at Garth Prison in the summer recess. My spar was working down there. He says, "Oh, I've got a friend who does black history. You can bring him down, whatever." So I'd just been suspended from school on a bogus assault charge.
Mm.
It was a political thing with the Asian community. And then my friend called me and he said, on a Tuesday it was, and he said, "Can you come down to a session?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Oh, well, it'll be a week on Thursday. I'll give you a week." You know, I said, "I can come down Thursday. I've been suspended on full pay.
Mm-hmm.
I've been suspended. I can come down." And I went down to do one session, stayed 4 years part-time. So it was, you know, you weren't getting paid for it. It was, the ridiculous thing was, we used to get, the average class size was seven inmates. We used to get 30, 32 packed in the room and everything. And yeah, like I said, learning, man. I learned so much. But yeah, that was the first wave of man. Then from first it was Liverpool, then it became Manchester, and thanks to Maurice McPherson, you know, who he created the space because he saw that his consciousness was connected. That he said he knew that something would be needed, and you know, so some of my guys I used to teach in school, who were hard at it,
mm-hmm.
were some of the most sensible guys who got into life, because I started teaching the guys in school about the game from when it started.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't going to stop it. I you know, I got them to control and focus the violence, and you know, did martial arts with them, was doing sports with them and all this business, and other good people working with them as well. But anybody who turns around and says that they knew what was going on is a lying person, because no one knew what was going on. It was like this COVID thing now. Yeah. No one knows what's going on. Everybody's innovating this, that, and the other. Well, that's what it was like in Moss Side back in that day. After Moss Side, it went down to Birmingham with the Burgers and Johnsons. Then it lit London. Then it went across to Nottingham, became Shottingham. And it was all this kind of joke. So we were Gunchester. We had Manchester for the music, Gunchester for the drugs, and the two were doing a merry dance. And then we were educated in the middle of all that. So, yeah. So it's interesting.